Hi everybody, welcome to today's lecture, which is on safety management from Chapter 8 of Children's Health and Safety. So, as normal, I will present for you the NACI standards. Once again, these are readily available in your textbook, but you can see kind of how we're going to be correlating this particular chapter to the NACI standards. One of the things that I always say at this point of the class is we're really at the halfway point, which means that this is the time when we're really going to start thinking about our final projects and our safety, our safety assessment of a school playground, a child care facility, and a local community playground as well. So looking at this chapter is kind of the most important chapter for our final project. So I think there's going to be some good information presented here today. So how are kids injured? How are kids hurt? Well, kids are hurt through unintentional injury. It's the most common way that death occurs in the United States. Infants and toddlers do have the highest risk of unintentional injury than anybody in the world, basically because they're still exploring without consequence, and all it takes is 1 second of non-supervision, and something could happen that could truly hurt an infant or a toddler. What happens? What happens that causes unintentional injuries? Car accidents, drowning, burns, suffocation, falling, poisoning. They're common. These are common occurrences that happen throughout the United States. And because they're common, we have to basically make sure that the environments that children interact in are safe and that there is close supervision for children. So, risk management. One of the things when you're assessing school playgrounds that you're going to have to look at is it worth it to spend all this time assessing whether or not something can be changed or better? Could it reduce the likelihood of injury? Anything that prevents a child from injury is always worth it. If you can find a way to improve something to better it that can keep a child safer, especially at the age group in which all of you are working, it's definitely worth it. Understanding what a child is and is not able to do developmentally is half the battle. You have to know what a child has the physical capabilities of doing. I've said it before earlier in the course, Child Development by Laura Burke is probably the best textbook on the market that tells you what a 1-year-old can do, what a 2-year-old can do, what a 3-year-old can do, what a 4-year-old can do. And I think that's important. And she goes up all the way through high school. So you should know the capabilities. And this makes it different when you're planning an outdoor environment or an indoor environment for children to play in. So if you have a classroom that you think is safe and efficient, but you don't realize that an infant is going to put everything in their mouths, then that classroom isn't sufficient, it isn't safe anymore. So you have to keep in mind the environment and the population of children that you're looking at. So this knowledge should be used to plan environments, prepare learning activities, select appropriate play equipment, safety guidelines, supervise children's learning and play experiences, and developing safety education programs. The big one that I want you to focus on is this notion of appropriate play equipment, indoor and outdoor. Big project in this class, you're going to be looking at outdoor play equipment. Is it appropriate? Is the environment appropriate? Can kids get easily injured? Are there things across the street that could be dangerous for kids? There's an area up in Butler County where there's a community playground, and then there's an adult store that's right across the street. So you question kind of the placement of the community playground. So location, environment, whether the equipment is appropriate or not for kids, that's important, and it's something that I want you to consider. So what causes unintentional injury? Well, basically when parents or supervisors just get tired of doing their job, and you're sitting here and you're thinking, no, that's not the case, but let's be honest, this does happen. People are, we are human. We get emotionally upset. We're not 100% all the time. It's 4 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Are we going to be as engaged in watching the children as we were at maybe 8 or 9 in the afternoon? If you're tired, if you're sick, or you're angry, or you're having a personal problem in your life, that's what causes injuries to occur. The other thing that can happen, and this is especially true in early learning centers that are hurting for people that can actually work in them, if a new teacher's added and they're not trained appropriately, children are more likely to get hurt. Children are rowdy and unreasonable at times. You know, I'm in this profession, I love this profession, I've worked with kids for 15 years, but we all know kids are rowdy and unreasonable sometimes. If there aren't enough teachers to handle that, things get out of hand, injuries occur. So many organizations have worked hard to come up with recommendations for injuries. NACI is one of them. You can also look at the American Academy of Pediatrics. The APHA has done a good job of this. What I need to stress on this is that things do happen. So it's going to happen whether you plan for it or you don't plan for it. The best thing that we can do is plan in advance, establish safety policies and guidelines, maintain good supervision, and provide safety education, and we can reduce the amount of injuries that occurs. We will not be ever able to stop the amount of injury that occurs. We can only reduce it. So advanced planning is important. One of the things that I want to stress is sort of this idea of people forgetting supplies. If you work at an early learning center and you're going on field trips, it's important that you take a first aid kit with you. It's also important that you have contact numbers for all parents. These are things that, you know, are taken for granted, but you might forget. Having supplies readily available and being one step ahead of what you're supposed to do and having a backup plan, that matters and that's important. And that's probably the biggest thing you can do towards advanced planning when you're working with young children. So guidelines are there to tell children what they should be doing properly and safely, but most of the time guidelines tell children they don't tell children that, they say don't do this. You're better off to tell a child you may do this, this, and this. Our book gives a good example of a way to say something positively instead of sounding like you were nagging, saying slide down the slide on your bottom feet first so that you can see where you're going. Listen to how that was said. That was said in a very positive way. There is no way to come up with a set of universal rules, but remember, the population of children you're being served is important. Do the children understand your roles, or are they capable of understanding your roles? What's available to you? Are you going to be giving them outdoor ideas on how to behave on outdoor equipment if your center is always inside and there's no outside playground? If there are a lot of adults available for supervision, or there are a few, then that reduces what you can and can't do. And then different activities require different types of supervision as well. So we give you some guidelines for climbing equipment. I'll read them to you, but this is something that you can see in the book. For children, you should basically tell them to hold on with both hands, keep hands to self, look carefully before jumping off, be careful if something is wet due to weather. And for adults, and this is what you're going to be doing for your final project, you're going to inspect the equipment before children play on it, check for broken parts and sharp edges, limit the number of children on a climber at one at a time, and then always have an adult in direct attendance while children are playing. And that's what I'm going to be looking for you to talk about in your final papers for this class. So for swings, some of you will be obviously assessing what a swing set looks like. For children, you want them to wait until the swing comes to a full stop before getting on or off of it. And we all know the first thing the kid wants to do when the swing is slowly coming down, they want to jump off. But if we can convince our children to relax and just take it easy and get off once the swing has come to a complete and final stop, we're good. Tell children to always sit on the swing seat. There should only be one child per swing. Only adults should push them, stay away from moving swings, and hold on with both hands. Adults need to make sure that the chain or rope is attached correctly, that the ground beneath is free from debris or sharp objects. There should be a safe area where children can wait their turn, and plan for more adults to be in attendance at all times. This is big on swing sets because if somebody does get injured, then another adult has to assume supervision. So recognizing safety efforts. As you take classes through this program, you're going to notice the proactive way of speaking that is very common in early learning environments. So look at this example. Helen, thank you for riding your bike slowly around the other children that were playing. Good job, Michael. You remembered that we get our materials one at a time, and you patiently waited your turn. So here is why we do this. Are we really doing this for Helen and Michael? No. We're doing it for the other kids that are around Helen and Michael because they want to get praised too. So even though we're praising Helen and Michael, we're giving guidelines for the other children that are in the room. And that is a big principle in early childhood education that you have to keep in mind. Even though I'm complimenting one kid, I'm giving instruction to the other kids that are in the area. So, quality supervision. It doesn't matter how much you do and how much you supervise. Some children will wait for the opportunity to do something that they're not allowed to as soon as an adult turns their back. And yes, this will happen when you're a classroom teacher. You might be the most organized, mannered, perfect person going into that position, but then kids, the second you turn your back, kids are doing something you don't want them to do. That's a challenge and that's a struggle. The younger that a child is, the more supervision they require. This is why we have small class sizes in the early grades. When we get up to the high school, middle school, class sizes continue to increase. Never leave children alone, even if only for a minute. Sometimes children that are physically aggressive have to be removed from a setting to ensure the safety of other children. One of the things that I think is important as a former school principal is that if a child is being physically aggressive, the first thing you should do is alert the other students to back away. And if you can get another adult present to help out with the situation, that protects you in your liabilities as a teacher or as an administrator, plus it protects the other children that are in the room as well. So when kids misbehave, and yes, kids will misbehave, here are some guidelines that can help you manage inappropriate behavior. Don't always tell the kid that they're doing something wrong, because then the kid's never going to listen to you. Make sure that if they do something wrong, 5 or 10 minutes later, you give them some sort of praise as to what they're doing right. Give them choices and provide them with positive choices. Instead of saying, you can't climb on the swing set, tell them, you can go over there and you can play kickball with the other children. Give them positive choices. If something isn't going the way that you expect it to, redirect them to another activity. If a kid's still not getting it, you can model the behavior. Try to help them use problem-solving techniques, but you and I both know that when we're doing this, some kids at different ages can do this better than others. This is a developmental thing. Some kids can, some kids can't. If you ignore the inappropriate behavior, that can work too. If it's not hurtful to others, there's nothing wrong with ignoring sometimes. And if the environment is causing inappropriate behavior, change the environment to discourage inappropriate behavior. One of the challenges that I had as a principal with one of the teachers in my building was where they kept their computers. It was a traditional square classroom, traditional regular classroom, and their class computers were all somewhere in this corner, somewhere in that corner, somewhere in this corner, somewhere in that corner. So when they were working with the kids that were on the computers in their small learning groups, the kids could group and they could have individuality at the computers, but they couldn't be at 4 different locations at once. So this caused problems. This caused children to fight over use of computers. And the easiest way to cure this was to move the computers closer together. So what we did, instead of having them in the corners, I suggested that they move them at the back of the classroom, kind of had them in a row, but still left space and bookshelves in between them. So then the teacher could be there and could be monitoring and observing, and the kids still had their own sort of privacy and their ability to work in small groups. So sometimes you have to change the environment. If nothing else is working, there's nothing wrong with that. So safety education. I want you to look at the NEA's pages for school safety. I obviously think this is important because it is in all caps. Use this for your final project. The link is available. It's there. This is something that you can use as one of the sources for your project. So, kids learn safety through teachable moments. Sometimes kids will correct their own behavior. If you see a child doing something wrong, sometimes other children will step in and they'll say, you shouldn't be doing that. And then all the other kids will direct their attention. And this can work sometime as well. one of the things that I think is important for safety education is kids need to know their telephone number or their address. That's very, very, very important. In case anything were to happen and they need to contact somebody, this is something that you have to use and something you have to facilitate. Implementing safety practices really is the teacher's responsibility. If you tell a kid to put something away so that nobody gets hurt, that doesn't mean that they will. You can't run around, especially some of you that are going to be working in early learning centers where you're working with 12 children after school, for one teacher. You're going to run around different groups and say, put that away, put that away, put that away, put that away. Some of the groups aren't going to put things away. Remember traffic and how people flow in and out of your classroom. You don't want lots of materials and lots of equipments by the windows or by the doors. So you have to keep that in mind. If you move things around or kids have stuff in the back of the room and they have to go cross over all the other kids because they come in late, that can be a problem as well. Safety isn't just in the classroom, but it has to be for all the personnel that are in a building. It has to be for the custodian, the bus drivers, even the secretary, parent volunteers. So if you have safety procedures, you need to make sure that everybody else is modeling correct and probable safety procedures as well. So, toys and equipment. Choking on small parts and pieces is one of the most common ways that childhood death occurs. How do you stop this in schools or in early learning environments? Well, I'll be blunt. You just don't have these things there. I've supervised in early learning centers quite frequently, and it shocks me at some of the things that are in early learning centers. I was in a 3-year-old room once, and they had little beads all around that the kids were used for making necklaces. I questioned this, like, why this would happen, when the first thing that I'm thinking is choking hazard, choking hazard, choking hazard, but the early learning center had beads for 3-year-olds. Is it different at home when kids are with parents? Yeah, because one-on-one time, you would hope that the kid would be responsible and do it on their own. But when you're in a center with your 8 or 9 kids, you're not going to be able to control everything. Injury will occur if kids are using materials that are not in their developmental range. You give a 2-year-old or 3-year-old a black Sharpie marker that you're going to use. Chances are the kid's probably just going to write all over themselves if they don't know how to use it developmentally appropriately. So make sure that the materials they use are in their developmental range and they're capable of doing it. So I give you a list of appropriate toys for infants. I'm not going to bother reading these. These are available in the textbook, and you can see these on the slide. Toys for toddlers, same exact thing. Toys for preschoolers. And things to look for when you're looking at toys. So, other possible considerations. One of the things that I always say is that, think about buying something on the internet without seeing it or physically holding it in your hands. Obviously, if you were to go to an internet site and purchase a toy as opposed from Learning Express or any of the places for early childhood toys, it's probably going to be cheaper. However, if you buy something and it's not what you want and you can't return it, then you're out money. So one of the best things that I've always suggested for people that are financially strapped for cash is to go to the stores, look around at what's there, write down things that might benefit your classroom, then go buy it online, make sure the brand's the same, make sure the SKU number is the same, and you're getting it at a cheaper price. Remember that not all toys are made in the United States. So our regulations are different than what's done overseas. So that can be a challenge and that can be a problem as well. Noise is also important. Children have more sensitive hearing. Hearing declines from when a child is born to when they become an adult. So their hearing is going to be more sensitive, and if you have 15 kids in a room with noisemakers and it's 8 in the morning and you're expected to be around those kids till 4, probably not going to be a positive day for you. So noise should be considered as well. So classroom activities, every time you plan an activity, you have to think, could an injury happen, could an injury occur? You don't think about the arrangements of the desks and you group your desks. A kid trips, they fall onto a desk, they crack their head off of it, they're bleeding all over the place. What's going to happen? Kids are going to start crying. That kid's probably going to be screaming. You're going to have to get a nurse. You're going to have to get another personnel in. And it could have been something as simple as watching how and watching where you arrange the desks. Anything can happen. Trust me, anything can happen. Every single one of you will have to clean up puke at least once in your academic career. I promise you that. Even though you're going into this profession thinking, I'm going to have this great class